Hi guys, and welcome to All About the Philippines. Now today we're going to talk about Philippines or Australia, where to retire. I'm doing it on Australia and the Philippines because I obviously live in Australia. But I do believe you can compare what I'm going to say to many Western countries such as New Zealand, America, Great Britain. So it's probably relevant to most of those countries in comparison to the Philippines. But I can only give my experience from living here in Australia to the advantages and disadvantages, if you like. So when we're talking about Australia, we'll talk about that first up. Australia is probably one of the most expensive places in the world to live. Probably not the most expensive, but it's up there. It's fairly high, especially if you're living in the major cities like Sydney in Australia. It's very, very expensive. Things like rentals, so to rent a place in Sydney or to buy a house in Sydney is going to cost you a fortune. I think the medium price in Sydney for a house is close on $1 million, somewhere thereabouts. So that's a lot of money. So what's that, around about 40 million pesos? A lot of money. Of course, if you move out into the country areas or what the Filipino people would call the province areas, we in Australia call them the country or rural areas of Australia, then of course the prices will drop. You're not paying so much for houses to buy a house or to rent. If you want to buy a house in the rural area, you're looking around about, depending on the type of house, but around about the $350,000 mark will get you a reasonable 3-bedroom home. So that's a comparison which we'll get into with the Philippines shortly. So food in Australia, it's getting quite expensive. You know, even if buying it from the supermarkets here in Australia, the prices have gone up. And to feed a family, well, in our family we have 2 adults, myself, my wife, and my 12-year-old daughter, and we'll run about $350 to $400 a fortnight in food. So could we cut down a little bit? Yes, we probably could cut down a little bit. So if we were careful, well, I think we could bring that down to about $300 a fortnight. Buying a car in Australia, quite expensive, depending on the type of car you want. But an average family car, you're probably looking around $25,000 brand new, $30,000 brand new, depending on what type of car you want. And interestingly enough, it's probably not much different to the Philippines. Probably a little bit cheaper in the Philippines, but not a lot. I find cars and electronics in the Philippines is not much difference to Australia. Now, electricity in Australia, of course, you've got to have electricity, and it's one of the highest prices in the world that we pay for electricity. So it's quite a big deal here in Australia. Many people are struggling to pay their electricity prices, especially if those people that are not working, don't have a regular income. It is really, really difficult. We pay around about here where I live, we pay around about $400 a quarter every 3 months. So every 3 months around $400, which is not bad. I know some people, they have bigger houses, they have whatever appliances they're running and whatnot. I've heard of people paying around about $1,000 a quarter. So it's quite a big expense for many people, but we've managed to find ways to keep it as low as we can. So petrol or gasoline, as the American and Filipino friends would probably call it, that put into the car, it's very expensive here in Australia. It depends where you live, of course. Different areas, prices vary dramatically. So on an average, we're looking around about $1.30 a litre and higher. So I'm not sure what that converts into gallons, but it's quite expensive. It's been up as high recently as $1.60 a litre in where I live here in Dubbo, and I think many other parts of Australia did get to that price at one point, but I think it's down around about the $1.30 a litre at the moment, maybe cheaper and maybe dearer in some other areas. So eating out in Australia, going to a nice restaurant is going to cost you quite a lot of money. Now, for my wife and I and our daughter, 12-year-old daughter, to go out and have a nice meal in a nice restaurant, we're going to be looking at it around about, for the 3 of us, $100 to $120, $130, depending if we have dessert or whatever else. But that would be an average price in a nice restaurant that we pay here where I live. Of course, if you're in the city, like Sydney, you're going to pay even more money for a decent meal in a nice restaurant than you would pay here where I am. Of course, you can get still decent meals if you go to some clubs in Australia, where you can get, they've got specials on for lunch or dinner from around about $10 a meal, so that's not bad either. So that's a good option for many people, and a lot of people do take advantage of their local clubs. So now moving on to the Philippines. So rentals and buying a house in the Philippines are far less expensive than Australia. So depending what you want to rent or what you want to buy will depend on the price, but it is far less to rent a place in the Philippines. You can rent a decent place for $200, $300, $400 a month. Buying houses, of course, that varies, greatly. But let's say here, as I say, here in Australia where I live, about 350,000 Australian dollars. If you're in the city, you're looking closer to $1 million Australian dollars. In the Philippines, you can get condos in the cities for 5 or 6 million that are quite nice. That's 5 or 6 million pesos, which are quite nice. So I think that converts roughly about 125,000 Australian dollars, and you're in a nice condo in Makati or wherever. You go into the province areas for probably 2 or 3 million pesos, you get yourself a nice house there as well, which is around about the 75,000 Australian dollar mark, which opposed, as I say, in the rural areas in Australia, you're looking at 350,000 Australian dollars. So it's much cheaper in the Philippines in that regards. And this is why a lot of people do retire in the Philippines, because of things like owning a house and by the way, guys, remember you can't, as a foreigner, or you can't own land in the Philippines. Only your Filipino wife can own that land, or someone who's a citizen of the Philippines. So it's something to bear in mind as well. So food in the Philippines is very inexpensive compared to what we have here in Australia. Like, I go to the Philippines when we go over there, and it seems so cheap. And the locals will say, oh no, that's expensive. But compared what we're used to here in Australia, the food over there is very cheap. You can go to a nice restaurant over there, and we can walk out and spending maybe 40 Australian dollars and had a really good feed for that price. So as I say, when we go out here, it's $100, $130, $140. So as I said earlier, buying a car in the Philippines, not much different to Australia, I found, buying it new. So there's really not much difference there at all from what I can see. We pay about 25,000 Australian dollars for a medium family car, maybe up to $30,000. You can go even higher than that here in Australia if you want something a little bit more upmarket, luxurious, four-wheel drives. You're going up to $50,000, $60,000. So it does change in Australia, but the Philippines is certainly slightly cheaper, but not a lot cheaper. So electricity in the Philippines, while many Filipinos say it's expensive there, it's nowhere near as expensive as Australia. I don't live in the Philippines, so I don't really know much about the electricity prices there. I've seen videos where people are giving their electrical expenses, and I'm hearing, figures around 2,000 a month, 1,300 a month, things like that for 1 month. Now that's pretty cheap in my book. Electricity for a Western person in the Philippines shouldn't be an issue. So again, same with petrol, gasoline in the Philippines, much cheaper than it is here in Australia. I can't convert gallons to litres and all that sort of thing, but I do know it's a lot cheaper in the Philippines, even though the Filipino people say, they're going complaining about the prices rising. But again, for a foreigner living in the Philippines, it should not be a big issue. The internet in the Philippines, it's the quality overall is nowhere near good as Australia. So in some parts it might be okay depending, but you're paying big money maybe in the big cities or whatever. But I've found when I've travelled around the Philippines, even sometimes in the cities, they're not that fast. So you've got to be very patient when uploading videos or whatever. You've got to take your time, because it's not going to get done in a hurry. In Australia, I pay around 80 to 100 a month for my internet. I get unlimited access, and it is quite fast where I am. But Philippines, you would pay far less than that, but the quality and the speed is definitely a lot less. So things to consider if you're thinking about moving to the Philippines from Australia or anywhere else in the world is that when you go to the Philippines, traffic in the cities is immense compared to probably where you come from. And there's cars just going everywhere. There's people, cars going here, there, tooting their horns, buses, taxis, everything just beep, 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 beep. It's quite, seems quite chaotic out there. You've got to manage the poor infrastructure. You're talking about the roads, the footpaths. There's no real good garbage collection facilities throughout the Philippines, really. The overcrowding, of course, causes a lot of homelessness, where you'll see people, they'll be sleeping around, under cardboard boxes on the streets. They'll be down Manila Bay, all sleeping around there. They'll be using Manila Bay as a toilet, all that sort of thing. The poverty levels in the Philippines are still there, and if you're living there, you can't avoid it. You'll see it quite regularly, as you do when you're a tourist. You walk around and you see these places, you can't help but see them. Then you're going to have to deal, most likely, depending where you're living, but with brownouts. So brownouts is when they turn their power off for a period of time, although the power may just go off for a period of time. But usually it can be a planned thing by the local area that we're going to switch off the power to conserve a bit of power between this time and that time. They'll often let you know that they're turning it off, but remember, you've got no aircon when the power is off, so maybe head towards a shopping centre if that's the case. Then some more serious issues, we're talking about natural disasters in the Philippines. Now you've got to remember, the Philippines is the second most natural disaster prone country in the world. So we're talking things like typhoons. They get on average 20 typhoons a year will enter the Philippines waters. So how many of those hit? It varies year to year, and where they hit, it varies year to year. Following from that is monsoons. They get quite a lot of monsoons. We're talking earthquakes, volcanoes. There's plenty of volcanoes, active volcanoes in the Philippines. So they're all things you've got to manage if you're going to live in the Philippines and learn how to manage. Obviously the Filipino people, they've learned over time how to be resilient and how to manage all these things. But sometimes with these events, as we saw back with Yolanda, with Typhoon Yolanda, it can take a lot of lives and be quite devastating. So, and of course you're going to have to manage the tropical weather. So all year round it's pretty warm. Of course in the summertime it gets warmer and hotter and is quite hot in summer. So if you're a person that doesn't really like the hot weather, then maybe the Philippines is not the go for you, or unless you want to move up to somewhere like Baguio in the mountains, it's a fair bit cooler in the summer. So that's something to think about. Tropical weather, it can get draining if it's day in, day out. So something for the bigger people, the larger people, a bit like myself. If you're going to move to the province, a province area, then you might be using tricycles a lot to get around from point A to point B and back again. You'll find yourself on a tricycle quite a lot. Now, if you're a bigger fella, then it's going to be quite difficult to get in and out of those tricycles, and it's not always comfortable. So there's something to think about as well. How are you going to manage, if you've got to get in and out of tricycles a lot, especially if you're getting a bit older and you might have some knee problems or ankle problems. It can be quite difficult. Buying clothes in the Philippines too, especially if you're a larger fellow, anything over about a 2 or 3XL, you may need to go to online stores to get anything, 3, 4, 5 XLs. So you won't find those in the Philippines very easily. So online shopping or getting relatives from your country to send those shirts and trousers to you would be the way to go. So finally, you need to learn a lot of patience in the Philippines. Things don't get done quickly there on the whole. So you go to get something processed, paperwork processed for whatever reason, whether it's visas, whether it's you're getting a license to drive there or whatever, it can take time. And finally, guys, you need to learn to have a lot of patience when you're in the Philippines. Things don't get done quickly. There's a thing called Filipino time that can sometimes frustrate foreigners pretty terribly. So learn the patience and go with it. You're living in the Philippines, you're not living in your country, and things are done differently. You need to convert to the way they do things. So anyway, guys, that's my comparison between the two. Philippines or Australia, where to live. Well, that's something for you guys to consider. I hope in this video we've given you a few ideas around that, what you need to be thinking about, what would be better, what not better. My own personal view is that I'm a man who's probably looking at retiring in the next 10 years or so, somewhere in that maybe 5 to 10 years. So I've got to look at how much savings I've got and whether that's going to be enough to live on with the pension, the age pension here, when I turn 67 in Australia. That's when I'm eligible for my age pension. So it's still way off, but I've got to plan ahead for that time. Now, if I'm thinking, what do I want to do? Can I afford to stay in Australia? I am thinking that it's going to be more difficult if I stay in Australia because of the costs compared to the Philippines. But do I want to trade the lifestyle I have here for that of the Philippines? I love going to the Philippines. I love traveling around the Philippines and seeing all those wonderful things and meeting all the wonderful people there. But do I actually want to live there full time? That's the question. So is it enough to say, yeah, I'll go and live in the Philippines because of the money factor and it's easier to retire at the expense of trading in all my modern comforts and way of life and living here in Australia? Can I manage to do that? Well, for me, time will tell. But for now, my plan is I love visiting there and I love traveling around there. So that's how it will be for now. In the future, who knows what will hold in that. And same for everybody. Everyone's got to make up their own mind on what their life would be if they were in the Philippines. So the way to do that, of course, is to go over there before you plan to do it. Go and check some areas. Go and travel around a bit and find out potential areas. Spend a few months in the Philippines, not just a few weeks, but a few months in the Philippines, if possible at all, to help make a decision on what could be possible for you, whether or not that's a possibility. Only you will know. Okay, guys, thanks very much for watching. Appreciate all your support. Don't forget to leave your comments below. Are you going to be going to the Philippines to live, or are you going to consider going to the Philippines to live at any time in the future? Of course, don't forget to share the video around with anyone who may like it. Share it to all your networks. Hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to get more videos as we go along. Thanks very much for joining me today, guys. Hope you're all doing well. Take care, and bye for now.